Hello and welcome back to From the BON, the Burnley podcast, and we're looking ahead to Saturday's clash at the Etihad against Manchester City. I'm Simon Evans, and with me is Darren Bentley, and Julian Jordan is back with us, our own JJ. JJ, how are you doing?
Soldiering on, Simon. My spirits are somewhat buoyed by the fact that I can indulge in this group therapy session ahead of what usually brings out PTSD in most Burnley supporters. So let's see if I feel any better at the end of this than I do right now.
Yeah, well, the track record, we'll get into that later on, but the track record, of course, of the Clarets at Manchester City isn't great. And we're coming into the game on the back of a 2-1 defeat against Cardiff City. But really, that's, in my mind, that was a reserve team game. It shouldn't have any impact on what happens on Saturday. But is there anything that comes out of that game, Daz, that you think will have any impact in terms of Scott Parker's thinking, perhaps?
I think they've probably buried it quite quickly. I can't imagine there was too many debriefs about it anyway. And the likelihood is we're going to see a different 11 on Saturday anyway, so the debrief would be pointless. Now you're at the competition. No, I don't think there'll be a hangover. I think what Scott Parker will have been instilling into the players over the past few days is the competitive nature of the team so far against really good football teams. You know, Tottenham for half an hour or so, 40 minutes, were well in that game. Manchester United, Liverpool could have easily taken points off both of them. So I think he'll be accentuating the positives, as managers tend to do, but with good cause, I think. You know, you're going to a heavyweight, and a heavyweight, by the way, that's landed some punches on us in recent years, but we go there in reasonably good spirits, having put up a bit of a fist of it so far in the Premier League. So I can't say I'm confident. That's not fair. I'm not as trepidatious as I would be on a normal Saturday. I might peek out from behind the settee a few times this Saturday, whereas normally I stay behind it when we play City.
I mean, it is, Julian, you've had a brief look, I know, at our record against Manchester City statistically. It's pretty grim reading, isn't it?
I think that's a diplomatic way of putting it. It's a horror show, in actual fact. There are 5 positive results that we've had against them in 30 years. Only one of those a victory, the famous 2015 victory where George Boyd's fabulous daisy cut to that immaculate half volley. That's the win. Then there are 4 draws. I remember one of them, 1998, 2-2 away, Main Road then. We wore that, do you remember that yellow and dark blue striped away kit that we had? I think front 2 of Payton and Cook that day. I lived in Manchester then, and basically ran all the way back home to Chorlton from Main Road with some lads in hot pursuit. But that was one. We had the draw 3 apiece in 2009. I think Kevin McDonald scored, I remember that day.
Yeah.
There's the 2-2 draw between Christmas and New Year in 2014. Barnes, you got that rocket, from inside the penalty area. And then there's a 1-1 draw in 2018 when
Goodmanson.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, and if you remember, Sterling missed an absolute sitter as well.
Yeah, that's right.
Harder to put it wide than scored, but he somehow contrived to do so. So that's it.
Quit while you're ahead there, Julian. Quit while you're ahead, because it don't get better after that.
No, I think there are 6. We've had 16 Premier League fixtures against them, and obviously there's the one win that I mentioned. I think we've got 3 draws in the Premier League and 12 City wins. But it's a weird one, because even when City were shit before they had any investment, they still used to whack us then, didn't they? I remember in the 90s, late 90s, they generally put 5 past us.
Yeah, Sean Gorton had to score a few, didn't they?
Yeah, if there's a spare place behind your settee, Darren, I might peek out through my fingers myself.
We've got a bigger one in special.
I might just go for a dog walk on Saturday afternoon. I might give it a miss this weekend.
But we have had those moments. You think about Goodmanson and Boyd, like you mentioned those moments, and there's been games where City's dominated possession against us, but we stuck at it. And then, of course, in the end, it always seems that the dam breaks. But Daz, I mean, the way we're set up this year, we haven't been tubbed by anybody yet. We do have that history, but there are indications that the way Parker's set up that team, that they will dominate the ball against us, but we might not necessarily be in for a tubbing.
No, it might well be a similar sort of game to Liverpool, where we line up with those 5 at the back again. We have that solid bank of 4 in front, and we make life hard for Manchester City, who we all know like to try and these intricate little passes. And if Haaland hasn't got the room to run in behind, that's another plus. I'd wake up with shivers thinking about Haaland against Ekdal, but if we get Steve on him, you never know. It's a great test for Steve, isn't it, against probably the best in the business. But if we can restrict that space and let them have the ball, they want it 40 yards from goal, let them have it. But if you then close down those gaps, keep forcing them wide and confidence in yourself that you can deal with the crosses, you can make life difficult for sides like this. City aren't the tallest side in the world. You take Haaland out of it in the forward thirds. Look, it's all about keeping it tight as long as you can, frustrating them, isn't it? And if you get a goal at the other end, then you've got something to hang on to. But it really is, finger in the wind time, isn't it? We're really up against it. There's no doubt about that. And we've just got to get through these games with as little collateral damage as you possibly can. In my eyes, if we come away with a 2 or 3-0 defeat on Saturday, no bat an eyelid, and we'll move on to Villa. And there's an international break, of course, before then, so you've got time to regroup a little bit. And so that's the bigger game of the two, Villa, I think. But it's another chance to test yourself against a big side, and we've done okay so far, haven't we? And that 5 at the back seems to be a system that he's hit upon now, that he's helping Laurent slotted in quite nicely in there. It makes life difficult for sides to play in behind us, so who knows?
I think that's a fair comment, actually. I'd agree with you in terms of accentuating the positives. I think that'll be Scott Parker's approach, certainly. We've been in every game so far this season. And I'll take a defeat if it comes with another really positive performance, because as much as I felt disappointed at the end of the Liverpool game because of the manner in which it finished, I didn't feel it didn't ruin my weekend, because I came away from that thinking that was a bloody good performance. Fantastic defensive display. So if we can do that again, I think it bodes well, because I think even the most critical person would have to acknowledge that our start has come with a run of games which, the fixture computer must hate us, mustn't it? Because really, really tough start. If we come through it relatively unscathed, as you say, and with a performance that you can take some positives from, I think we'd probably accept that. Another positive way of looking at it is we're bloody due a decent result against this lot, aren't we? Eventually, we've got to get a point off them, or 3 eventually sometime.
You said good performance, though. You said good performance. More than that, I think it was a good game plan, perfectly executed. And if anything comes out of that Liverpool game, apart from, as you said, a performance of the players, it's the fact that Scott Parker now can lay down a game plan against these sides that we can possibly execute. So, I'm sure he'll be looking to replicate a similar sort of thing again.
Yeah. So, to look at City in a little bit more detail, because, we try to keep up with what all the other teams are up to, but people who watch them week in, week out obviously have a greater insight than we do. So, earlier on, I had a little chat with Tyrone Marshall, former Lancashire Telegraph Burnley correspondent, who for the last 6 years or so has been working for the Manchester Evening News. Tyrone, thanks for joining from the Beale end.
No problem, Simon. Good to be on and back chatting a little bit of Burnley as well. I'm looking forward to seeing a few familiar faces at the weekend, although there's not many left now from my days there. What, 6.5 years ago or so?
No, they're all on this podcast now. They're but so City, I saw them in the summer at the Club World Cup, Juventus, and then they went out to Al Hilal from Saudi Arabia, and it looked like a new City taking shape, very different from the one we'd seen last season. It's been a sort of mixed bag, I would guess, so far for City, but how would you assess how this new look City is sort of bedding in?
It feels like it's taking shape now. That Juventus game kind of started a pattern where it felt like they were back, they were not back, they were back, they weren't back. So you had Juventus where, like you say, I thought they were brilliant against Juventus, and then Al Hilal, you're like, same problems as last season. Then they beat Wolves 4-0 on the opening day and looked great, and you're like, yep, they're back. And then they lose to Tottenham, and you're like, nope, it's the same problems as last season. And then they lost to Brighton before the September international break, and I think alarm bells were ringing. Then I certainly thought this looks very familiar to last season, the same sort of problems. I did sort of fear for them at that point. since the September break, they've been very good. 3 wins and that draw at Arsenal, and it does feel now like they're making progress. They may be back on track, back to at least challenging for the biggest titles. And Pepper's made a big thing over the last week or so of kind of the spirit and the body language that he's seeing, and how that is telling him as much as performances, that he's seeing a closer team and a closer spirit. And from what he's seeing in that regard, it feels like they are kind of back on the right track.
The style of football is always prompts a debate because of Guardiola, and people have sort of got used to Pep's way of playing football, and then when they score a goal off a counter-attack, it becomes like a debating point, doesn't it? As though this is some massive change of philosophy. But there are some shifts in the way that City play. I mean, Burnley fans probably think back to those successive 5-0 defeats. We seem to get hammered every time we went to the Etihad, and that was a City team that utterly dominated possession and toyed with Burnley in all of those games. How far away have they gone, do you think, from that approach, and how much is just people getting carried away about a few long balls to Erling Haaland?
Yeah, I don't think they've gone massively away from that as a principle when they're on their day. And, with all due respect to the Clarets, they'll probably monopolise possession on Saturday. I mean, I was at Huddersfield on Wednesday night, and they had 80-odd% possession in the first half and finished with 75. And although it was 2-0 and 1-0 for large periods, you never thought Huddersfield were going to do anything because they couldn't get the ball. So I think it's opposition dependent. And the thing with Guardiola is, he's got his clear principles, but he's always been adaptable. He had a great City team without a striker, and then signed the best number 9 in the world, but also the most obvious number 9 in the world, and adapted to that. They won the treble when they played 4 centre-backs for the second half of that season. This was the manager who at Barcelona basically played midfielders as defenders, and then won the treble with City with centre-backs as full-backs. So I think there's always been a degree of adaptation there. I think we're seeing it a bit with the goalkeepers this year. So I think... I think there are slight changes, and it was noticeable last year that he talked about how what Bournemouth were doing and Brighton were doing was modern football, and you kind of saw it again at Brighton at the last 20 minutes of that game. Once Brighton had equalised and Hurlitzer made 4 changes, City just totally wilted. So I think there's going to be subtle shifts during the season. It is a very new team. There's been 10 first-team signings in 2025. But I think on Saturday, obviously it was a big debate at Arsenal because they had the lowest percentage of possession in Pep's City career, the lowest in a league game.
Something like
I
that,
think it was less than about 33. From what City people have said, it kind of felt like it was circumstance driven, that it was basically Arsenal just kept pushing them back. City had played on Thursday night and barely any preparation time for Arsenal, and were knackered, and that combination just led to them playing defensively. But obviously we saw them getting more and more defensive with the substitutions, and I think maybe there's going to be a degree of that. Maybe at times they'll be more defensive this season, but I think as the season goes on, we'll probably see that there's not going to be that big a shift from what we see. And I do think it's forgotten at times that you do see, Guardiola he does adapt. He does move from things to things. Those City games that you mentioned when City were beating Burnley were often with wingers like Sane and Sterling bombing down the outside, and you'd see that City goal. They'd score it constantly, wouldn't it? That low ball across the 6-yard box, and the other winger would score it. And then they went away from that and had kind of inverted wingers, or even people like Bernardo playing on the wing now, who basically plays in midfield. So I think he's always adapted, and he's always kind of had to adapt. And I think at the moment it's so early in the season, it's hard to kind of put your finger on how things are changing. But I think the principles, when they're in top gear and when they're playing a team who maybe aren't as good as Arsenal and have circumstances slightly more in their favour, I still think you'll see them trying to control the ball and control the game.
Those new faces that come in, as you mentioned, like 10 in 2025, who has stood out for you of those? I mean, obviously there's a couple of key ones have been injured, haven't they? But who stood out for you of the new faces?
I mean, it's only 3 games in, but I think Donnarumma has been excellent and has the potential to be the best of the lot, to be honest. I I think he's, we'll obviously maybe get onto the keepers with the Burnley connection with James Trafford, but Donnarumma's signing I think it kind of speaks to Pep's adaptability, that he's got away from someone like Ederson, who helped City control games so well, and now we're back in this kind of era of set pieces and long throws and putting teams under pressure in their 6-yard box, and City have signed a goalkeeper who's almost a cheat code to that. You saw it on Sunday at Arsenal, that every time Arsenal went for a long throw or stuck the ball in the 6-yard box, you've got this giant keeper who punches everything away. Other than that, I mean, Kusanov, I think, has been really good defensively. Played at right back until he got injured, has looked good recently. Reinders, I think, is probably second on the list behind Donnarumma. He's looked really good. The others, I think, you're still kind of, Aït-Nouri and Cherki are now both injured. Gonzalez hasn't really done it since signing in January. Marmoush looked good last season, had a slow start to this season and has got injured. So I still think there's a lot of question marks over probably a lot of those players. But I think the two, Donnarumma and Reinders are going to be the certain starters, I would think, on Saturday. And I think they've both had pretty good starts to this season.
Yeah, I think Cherki will be a great player when he gets fully fit and back. He's what I've seen from him. He looks the real deal. That goalkeeper situation we have to talk about, as you say. I mean, for Burnley fans, it's there's a slight amount of schadenfreude there from some people. I think that Trafford was so keen to get away, and now he's ended up in that situation. But it does look a bit grim for him, though, doesn't it? I mean, he played at Huddersfield, and that's what he is now, isn't it? He's the guy who plays in the Carabao Cup and FA Cup matches.
Yeah, it does seem like that. I mean, it's a really strange situation, and it's kind of shrouded in mystery as well. I mean, when Trafford came in, we were told that Ortega was going to go, and essentially Trafford would battle with Ederson this year. I think a lot of people would have fancied him to win that battle, and Ederson was always going to go next summer at the end of his contract. And I think that's probably what was sold to Trafford as well when City kind of made their move, that this is the pathway for you. And then suddenly that changes. And even with the whole Donnarumma thing, there was a lot of one side saying this is dependent on Ederson leaving City. And then the other side are saying, well, actually, this is dependent on City signing Donnarumma, and then they'll let Ederson go. And it's kind of like, who's waiting for who? And then, I mean, Donnarumma did a press conference before the Napoli game last week and says, I knew about the interest from the very start of the summer. And it's like, right, well, that contradicts everything else. So I'm
sure James Trafford was interested to hear that.
Well, exactly. And I can't imagine, I mean, I can't say for certain, but I can't imagine Trafford was told we're trying to sign Gianluigi Donnarumma as well, because, I mean, you reach the level that James Trafford's at and you back yourself to win pretty much any selection battle. But he's well aware that getting ahead of a 32-year-old Ederson with a year left on his contract is a totally different challenge to getting ahead of a 26-year-old Gianluigi Donnarumma, who's just been voted the best goalkeeper in the world, who was literally just signed for the club. The path to him becoming City number one looked pretty clear at the end of July when he signed, and now it looks very complicated, doesn't it? I mean, Guardiola said on Tuesday that, my number twos always get a lot of games, and they have done, but that's mostly because Ederson has been injured. And like I say, I think Trafford will play in the League Cup games, he'll play in the FA Cup games, probably play away at Bodo Glimt in January, but I mean, he's got to do a hell of a lot to challenge Donnarumma there, I think, hasn't he? And, last night at Huddersfield, he didn't have anything to do. They didn't have a shot on target. No. It's very difficult for him to impress in those games and to make any case that he should be anywhere near the team ahead of Donnarumma. I think the reality is against Burnley, it's going to be Donnarumma in there. So it is a really interesting one. You do wonder if he had his time again, whether he'd maybe pick Newcastle, because he obviously had
Nick
that
Pope maybe a bit
summer.
Easier to dislodge than Donnarumma.
Yeah, definitely. Pope's a good goalie, isn't he? But he's not Gianluigi Donnarumma, and I think that one might have been easier. I mean, from a City perspective, I think they would probably fancy their chances if Trafford plays 10 to 15 games in League and Cup this season, and then it reaches a point next summer where he's like, this ain't going to work for me. I think City would fancy their chances of making their money back at least and selling him maybe for a profit again if he does pretty well. But yeah, I don't think that's the dream that was sold to James Trafford when he signed in July, that come back and will flip you for a profit again in 12 months. I think the dream was that he was going to be number one, and he said as much when he played in Palermo in their only pre-season friendly, that he wanted to be City's number one. But like you say, that I think it's pretty difficult to see a route to that happening now, given he's only 4 years younger than Donnarumma.
Yeah. No, it's a shame for him, really, in a lot of ways. I mean, looking at this game on Saturday, Burnley a lot tighter at the back than they were under Vincent Company for sure, but also feel a little bit more compact and tighter and a little bit stronger than the back end of the Sean Dyche years. Nobody's hammered Burnley yet of the bigger teams. United and Spurs and Liverpool haven't hammered Burnley yet, but there's something about this fixture that there's been so many hammerings that you sort of feel like it's automatic. But I don't know how much you've seen of the Clarets this year, but what's your feelings about their chances of at least being competitive in this one?
I mean, they've got a chance of being competitive. Like you say, I think if this was a Company team, then I think they'd probably get torn apart. But I think they're gonna play with a maturity, aren't they? That they kind of know what they're up against and play defensively. That Liverpool game, they looked pretty solid, didn't they? They didn't really look like conceding until that penalty. The United game, they were really competitive second half. They were maybe fortunate to still be in the game at half time, but second half they were really, really competitive at Old Trafford and probably unlucky to lose in the end. So I think they've got a chance of making it competitive. The question mark you kind of have over City to a degree still is the goals and where they come from without Haaland or aside from Haaland. And obviously, Haaland didn't play at Huddersfield. He came off early at Arsenal. He's been complaining of a bad back. He didn't train all week until the Huddersfield game.
He needs another week's rest, really.
Yeah. I'm sure you'd be happy for him to have a week off again. I mean, I would imagine he'll be fine and he'll be in a team, but it's a back injury. It's one of those that it's not impossible. It'll be interesting to say what Pep says on his Friday press conference about him. And without him or even with him, the question is over the goals, because even if Haaland they didn't score anywhere near enough last season, and Haaland got 22 in the league, and if Haaland gets 32 in the league this year and everyone else gets the same, it still only takes him to mid-80s, and that ain't going to win you the league in this day and age. So other people have to step up, and I think Foden looks like he is stepping up. He's had a brilliant couple of weeks. He looks back to his best, and I think if Foden and Haaland are on it, then City will win. But the one question you'd have is about the goals, because as kind of and it's only a Carabao Cup tie, but as in control as they were at Huddersfield on Wednesday, they didn't create a lot either. And you never really felt it was going to be like a 5-0, 6-0 that you sometimes see in those games. Obviously, you've got Haaland in the team. It's a different proposition. And it's obviously not beyond the realms of possibility that it gets difficult for Burnley, especially because, Haaland has been sensational so far this season. He looks like he's really upped it again. And I think it's a stroke of genius from Guardiola adding him to the leadership group, because it looks like it's brought something extra out of him and a bit more responsibility. So if he is fit and he's playing, I think it's going to be clearly tough for Burnley. But the one question you still have over City is kind of getting enough goals. And, they won 4-0 at Wolves on the opening day. It didn't feel like a 4-0 game, and Wolves obviously haven't got a point so far. They beat United 3-0. That didn't really feel like a 3-0. So I'm not sure it's going to be a 5-0 like Burnley fans have experienced there in the past. I can see him. I can see it being competitive, but it's hard to see anything but a City win, isn't it?
Yeah. Last one, Tyrone. Kyle Walker, obviously going back to the Etihad. His last couple of performances for Burnley have been outstanding, particularly against Nottingham Forest. He really looks like he's the leader of the team now, and leading by example in a lot of ways. Still looks to me like Kyle Walker, for all the talk of him, his legs having gone and all that kind of stuff. There's not that much evidence of it so far, but would expect him to get a good welcome from the City fans.
I think mostly, yeah. I think probably mostly, but I think internally, I don't think it ended well. for him. I think, we touched on that with that interview he did with the Telegraph, didn't he, a few weeks ago, and he spoke about how kind of people at City blamed him for leaving in January, and I think obviously things had fallen apart for City in the few months previously. He'd been pretty poor. He was captain, and I think he couldn't kind of bring that unity. There was a lot of, I said recently, Pep's talked about the spirit a lot recently, and could see it wasn't there last year. Even after the FA Cup final, the players were throwing daggers at each other in the mix zone and saying, like, we've learned who to trust this year and things like that. And I think probably a degree of that was maybe aimed at him. I don't think things ended particularly well. I think there was a lot of bridges burnt with the way he went and jumping ship in January. I mean, he was always a mad choice as captain, to be honest, for me. But Pep did love him, and he loved the leadership he could bring when things were going well. And I remember doing the Club World Cup in Saudi Arabia, and that came at a point in time when City were struggling mid-season in December 2023. And Pep absolutely raved about the things that he did in that week in terms of bringing everyone together. And it was a huge turning point in the season, and they went on to win the league. But I think when things got tough, he maybe wasn't there in the way that the manager expected him to be. And yeah, I think the fans will probably remember the good times. But he's it's pretty obvious he's a player that comes with a hell of a lot of baggage, isn't he? And I think I don't think things ended particularly well for him at City. And I would imagine he's coming back feeling he has a point to prove, to be honest. As well, given the way it ended. But then De Bruyne came back last week thinking he had a point to prove as well, and he went off after 25 minutes. So yeah, maybe it'll go better for Kyle Walker than it did De Bruyne. But it'll be interesting to see his reception because, I think fans are probably only really getting the highs. I think there's a lot of reading between the lines probably to work out maybe that it ended quite badly for him and things like that. So I would imagine, I certainly don't see him getting booed or anything like that, but it might not be like, I certainly don't think it'd be comparable to the reception De Bruyne got for Napoli either.
Right. Yeah, interesting. Right, well, enjoy it. I hope you do see some familiar faces in there amongst the press box fraternity. Nice. But
unlikely.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Tyrone. I appreciate that. And
no problem.
It's been really interesting.
No worries. Thanks, Simon. Much appreciated.
So that's Tyrone saying there, really, that City's still a bit of a work in progress, that Pep Guardiola has brought in quite a lot of new players over the last 12 months, and they haven't all embedded in there. It does feel a different side than when, the Gundogan, David Silva, that team just felt unstoppable. It doesn't quite feel like that, does it?
No, he's definitely on the N3 build of his time at the Etihad, isn't he? And this side hasn't really hit the heights yet, and it's telling that they're not really in the consciousness when people talk about title contenders. It seems to be Liverpool and Arsenal again, doesn't it? Now Arsenal seem to have taken that mantle from Manchester City in the last couple of years, and City are flying under the radar a little bit, and they're a little bit susceptible, aren't they? Which City sides didn't tend to be for quite a long time. You do feel like you can get at this lot defensively. Whether we've got the armoury to do that remains to be seen, but you do feel they're a little bit more fragile than they have been, but they've still got a monster up front I saw something like he'd scored 5 goals in his first 4 games, which is his worst start in the Premier League, which tells you everything you need to know about Haaland, doesn't it? That's his worst start, and he's still banging him in. So he's the guy you've got to keep quiet, isn't he? If you can keep him quiet, the chances are they don't score too many, but they've always got a threat.
They scored against Huddersfield in midweek. I mean, they only scored 2 against Huddersfield in midweek in the cup, and there were, it's only a couple of years since they were putting 9 past Burton Albion and things like that in the cup competitions.
Yeah,
Julian, do you think that 5 at the back, which we've used, it seems, also in an attacking sense to get more out of our fullbacks going forward, it frees them up, doesn't it? Do you think it works as well for a backs against the wall job?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I'd advocate a 5-5-0 formation for Saturday and see how I get on. So certainly a 5 at the back, but I agree it does allow the fullbacks to get forward. And if there are some points in the game, if we can hold them off sufficiently, then hit him on the break, get forward, some of the part of the highlight of this season thus far for me has been the performance of the new signings, the ones that have been starting. Obviously, we don't see much of Breuer yet, but both fullbacks have been absolutely great. I think Hartman's been fantastic. I thought he was unlucky on Saturday not to score himself. That rocket he fired in just before we equalised. Actually, I think he started well, and I think he's improved with every game as he's settled. And Walker, really impressed with him. Really, really impressed with him. And he's doing that sort of inversion thing points in the second half, I noticed, because I sit near you, actually, as I'm in the lower tier of the junior mark, and there's points where we're getting forward and he's coming round into midfield. And there's one point in play where he was the most advanced Burnley player, and he's in the centre of the pitch as well. So, I think it does give us opportunities when we're getting forward. Whether we'd be as sort of adventurous as that when you're playing away against City, I don't know. But it does give us those kind of possibilities. I think it's been working pretty well, and I think by and large he's likely to stick with it for most games.
I mean, the big question is with Ugochukwu coming back from his suspension and Florentino Luis having made a good start in the centre of midfield. We talked about it before, Daz, but now he's got to decide, hasn't he? What's that midfield look like? Does he go with those two and Cullen and sacrifice one of the forward players?
Yeah,
if you're going to do it, it's this game. You do that, isn't it?
Yeah, we touched on that. By including Josh Laurent in that back five and then having those two holding midfielders, you have to sacrifice somebody further forward up the pitch. Not necessarily going to be a big issue, I don't think, against City. I was really disappointed we played 5 at the back against Cardiff. That one for me was a chance to sort of impose ourselves on Cardiff that we never took. But that's a completely different animal, isn't it? You're at home against a lower league side. Now you're playing one of the big guns. It would make complete sense to revert back to what he's been doing. I think the way Florentine played, I think you play him. I think Ugochukwu's on the bench. And we wouldn't have said that a few weeks ago, but as soon as Luis comes into that sign, you look at him, you think, what a player he looks. So you can't leave him out for me. And you're not going to drop Josh Cullen. So you're going to play the two of those. And I don't see either Ugochukwu or Florentina being as a number 10. So
no.
It does cause a problem for him, but I think I would play Florentine myself, and I would have Ugochukwu as a backup.
What do you think about that, Julian?
I mean, given that it's City away, I think if there's a way you could get all 3 of those in there, I would do it.
I mean, there is, but you probably have to leave out Chouamani or someone like that then.
Yeah.
And
you've got even less attacking options, haven't you?
Yeah. I would certainly consider. But just going back to Daz's point about playing 5 against Cardiff, I didn't see the game on Tuesday, but I was frequently checking in on it. You made the point earlier, will it have any bearing on this weekend? Probably not, I think it's fair to say. But from a supporter's point of view, it's not the morale-boosting victory you'd want before a trip to the Etihad for a start. In addition to that, when I was talking to Jack, my son, and when we saw that side, when the lineup was announced, we both agreed that's a really strong 11. Say that's a second string. Looks really strong. And Jack said, I think he'd be disappointed if that side didn't finish at least in the top 6 in the Championship. They should be good enough to be getting promotion. There's lots of lads that were in that 11 that you would expect to be in and around our starting 11, certainly on the bench, and probably making a performance, getting some minutes, I should say. So I found it somewhat demoralising, I have to say. I mean, I had the debrief that you did the other day. I listened to that, and I thought the points that you made about, it needs to be looked at. It sort of demonstrates some of the sort of flaws in English football at the moment. But specifically from a Burnley point of view, I would love to see us progress in a competition and get close to silverware, and that seems to probably the most likely option. So to fail so miserably is demoralising in that sense. The potential for progress in a cup competition, but also in terms of how much strength in depth do we actually have? Because I as I say, I was in total agreement with Jack. I thought it looked like a strong 11. You'd expect a good number of those to be in the sort of 8-man squad on the day on Saturday. So yeah, I don't know. I didn't know what to make of it, but it really, really disappointing. And as you say, if there's an opportunity to progress, why would he? If he was going to be more flexible, then playing 5 at the back against Cardiff perhaps wasn't the approach we should have taken, really. So disappointing. And for me, sort of morale-wise, it didn't set me up great for this weekend, I have to say.
Mike Trezor mate the bench? There's your question. I'll throw that grenade in.
Yeah, well, it's been debated all over social media. Is that what I mean? He had a 10-minute cameo, and let's be honest, he came off the bench and he made more happen in that 10 minutes than quite a lot of players had done in the previous 80, including somebody who he's competing with, you would presume, for a place on the bench, Marcus Edwards. You know, Trezor made an impact. Now, is he only playing 10 minutes because that's all he can do with his fitness levels? We don't know. It's a complete mystery what's going on with Trezor, but 10 minutes with the amount of subs you're allowed these days, Daz, is it worth having someone like that who, if somehow we're at 0-0 with 10 minutes to go?
Well, I'll tell you what, if it's 0-0 with 10 minutes to go, he isn't coming on. 2 more defenders.
Well, that's true, yeah.
That's what's happening there. But what he does perhaps do, if you're 3 or 4 down with 20 minutes to go, it gives you another chance to give him another go and have another look at him. Because for whatever reason, and Parker sees him day in, day out on the training ground, and he's not picking him in the side. That's the first thing to say. So everyone's a manager. Everyone thinks, you know, they see a player for 10 minutes and think, why is he not playing? But these managers and the coaching staff see them every day. They've got all the stats on the running. They've got other physical stats. They've got the fat content. They've got whatever you want to back it all up. So if he's not in the squad, there's a reason he's not in the squad. Now, Parker's well within his rights not to tell us that, but it's a strange one, and it does give a little window, doesn't it? If you're getting hammered at Man City on Saturday for 25 minutes, I'm not saying it's the most exciting prospect in the world, but you could say to him, on you go, mate, 25 minutes, give us what you got, and have another good look at him in a competitive environment. And there's a few like that, but the side picks itself after Tuesday night. What Julian was saying about the 11, we talked about this in the debrief, didn't we? That side picks itself. None of those players who came in and played that game on Tuesday are in competition. For me,
nobody
who
was taking a place there, were they? Unfortunately,
Shocker was going through the motions a little bit, perhaps because he was feeling his way back in, but he got booked on his return. Hannibal is Hannibal, and he's either amazing or he's a liability. But I don't see Hannibal starting. So I think he goes with the 11 we had against last time out. That's what I think.
Yeah, I would think he goes with that. Either that 11 or he plays Chukwu and Florentino together and sacrifices one of Chouamani or Jadon Anthony, which is, would be a shame because you want to have that counter-attacking threat down both sides. But,
he's not going to drop Anthony, is it? Because Anthony's his golden boy. And by the way, with good reason, because he's been brilliant for us this season, I think.
Yeah, but he's the outball as well, isn't he? He's got to be. Julian, you're back. When you look at that side, the big problem is, if we're gonna pull off an upset, we need to nick one somewhere and produce an amazing rearguard performance. Are you sticking with Lyle Foster for this game as the striker? I mean, Breuer did nothing to make that choice any more difficult for Scott Parker, but Fleming scored a goal and looked decent at times. Are you sticking with that one?
I think I would. I think Foster's form's been brilliant. I think he's been great. His work rate's fantastic. I think you guys have made the point yourselves. A lot of his best work happens in the middle third, not the final third, which is a great shame. But I think we'll need that level of industry. And I love his physicality as well. If he gets an opportunity to run at the opposition with the ball, he's a great ball carrier. I love that type of forward who's a real handful, difficult for defenders to live with. And he's got all that. It's a shame he's not the kind of natural finisher that some other players, your natural forwards are. I think Fleming, he warmed on me as last season progressed. But he always looks a bit of a big heavy set lad. He's not quite as mobile somehow. And I just think they'll find him easy to defend against. So I can't really see him featuring. Going back to the question we raised about, Magic Mike and, who might make an appearance. I'll tell you, I would put on for the last 10 minutes. If he makes the 18, Barnes. Barnes will get you a free kick high up the pitch. He'll shit house. So, we can game manage for the last 10. So if you're talking about strikers who should be in consideration, I would still look at Ashley Barnes in that kind of game.
Purely for the last 10 minutes, shit house.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I can see Ruben Diaz quaking in his boots already.
Yeah.
Go on, Barnes.
Yeah.
He would win you a free kick down that end of the field. It's true. There's absolutely no doubt about that. But he didn't even get a start against Cardiff, did he? That's how far down the pecking order he is. And I think he could. That little video the club did the other week, which quite a bit of the content was him worrying about getting into the 25-man squad as well, wasn't it? So I think that's where he is really. But going to be an interesting one. Anyway, let's see what we can get out of it. We will be back with a rapid reaction to that performance at City and all the usual shows after that as well. Thanks very much for joining us. Thank you, Julian, for joining us again. I'm sure we'll see more from you throughout this season. It's always good to have that level, sort of sensible old head in midfield, putting his foot on the ball and considering the bigger picture.
I see myself more as the magic Mike of this podcast. So I come on like once a season for 10 minutes, play one decent pass, and then bugger off again.
We never see you again.
Hey, Julian, I know where I stand. I'm only here to bring some hair to the podcast because otherwise it's the boat squad.
Well, if you weren't here, this would look like a shit game of billiards if you were squinting at your screen.
It normally does.
Yeah.
All right, brilliant. Well, we'll see you again on that rapid reaction. And until then, up the Clarets.